And then she told me, she said, watch out for the wolves in Hollywood, honey. And I said, well, I've been in British films for 3 years. I can handle wolves. And she said, well, not the power buses, honey. And she said, if they don't get what they want, they'll drop your contract. They've done.
Everyone knows old Hollywood holds a glamorous history. Legendary stars were born, and entertainment reached its golden age, but devastating secrets were buried to cover up shocking controversies. These are but a few explosive old Hollywood rumors that turned out to be true. Number 20. Forced abortions. Old Hollywood demanded two things of its starlets. First, they had to embody the kind of allure and sensuality that Marilyn Monroe and Rita Hayworth so famously personified. The second was an off-screen requirement. They had to maintain an image of purity. Studios believed that mothers couldn't sell sex appeal as effectively, so any hint of scandal, especially an unexpected pregnancy, could shatter the carefully curated public images. This eventually found its way into the infamous morality clauses introduced by Will H. Hayes in 1922. He collaborated with studios to ensure their top earners would sign on the dotted line, a bizarre assurance that no scandals would threaten their reputation. Any hint of controversy, especially an unexpected pregnancy, could shatter the carefully crafted illusion of glamour. So, in reality, these contracts were merely control tools, ensuring the studios maintained a firm grip on their stars' personal lives. Rumors swirled that these morality clauses kept Jean Harlow from marrying, as Hollywood insisted a bombshell couldn't be a wife. Still, she continued her relationship with William Powell and eventually became pregnant, only to mysteriously check into the hospital for rest. Jeanette MacDonald faced a similar fate. She was quietly admitted for an ear infection when she became pregnant, and Ava Gardner was reportedly whisked away to London for her procedure. MGM studio head Louis B. Mayer saw pregnancies as mere inconveniences, instructing his stars to simply get rid of the problem. A network of Hollywood fixers handled these procedures with little concern for the physical and emotional toll they took on the women involved. Lana Turner's abortion was performed in a hotel room without a trace of anesthesia. And as biographer Lee Israel puts it, Tallulah Bankhead got abortions like other women got permanent weaves. It was just that routine behind the scenes. But perhaps the most tragic case was Judy Garland's. It's one thing for studio executives to pressure an actress into ending a pregnancy, but it's another for her own mother to ensure her grandchild never saw the light of day. Make no mistake, guys. Abortion was rampant during what was supposed to be Hollywood's golden age of glamour and excess, and failure to conform meant punishment. Those who couldn't bear the pain, whether physical or emotional, saw their careers vanish, while others like Lupe Velez chose to end their own lives. Speaking of which, you might want to check out the next explosive rumor on our list. Number 19. Natalie Wood's possible murder. Remember when Tinseltown was painted red by the blood of Natalie Wood? It left behind terrible halls filled with unanswered questions and haunting rumors that have since changed the narrative. Talent, grace, beauty, the dazzling actress had everything to be the greatest in entertainment. She had 3 Academy Award nominations before the age of 25, but died under mysterious circumstances when the ovation was loudest. Here's how it happened. After a night of drinking on a yacht with her husband Robert Wagner, Natalie Wood's body was found floating in a Catalina Island cove, dressed in a nightgown, socks, and a jacket. Wagner claimed that he and co-star Christopher Walken argued, with Wood storming off in embarrassment. He assumed she tried to take the yacht's dinghy to shore, which was later found about a mile from the yacht and close to where her body was recovered. The autopsy revealed she may have consumed 7 or 8 glasses of wine, with fingernail scratches on the dinghy indicating she tried to climb back in. Sounds just about believable, right? I mean, it doesn't take much to fall overboard. With just a little wine or a mind-altering substance, anything could happen. She might have just been outside stargazing and accidentally slipped. An accidental death, as investigations claimed. Hollywood and fans grieved for weeks, but as evidence gradually emerged, perspectives began to change. The question shifted from, how did Natalie die, to who was responsible for her death. Natalie Wood's family publicly expressed doubts about Wagner's dinghy story. Her sister Lana Wood told CNN that Natalie not only had zero knowledge about swimming, but also had a fear of being in water. She would never have ventured to another boat or the shore wearing a nightgown and socks, so an external party had to be involved. Worse yet, the coroner's report suggested her down jacket became waterlogged and pulled her under. This couldn't have happened because the jacket would have acted as a flotation device instead. The most shocking aspect is Robert Wagner's involvement in Natalie Wood's drowning. Despite being the man she married not once but twice, Wagner failed to search for her for over 2 hours after she went missing from their boat near Catalina Island. Shouldn't he have been the one most desperate to find her? The original photos also showed Natalie had cuts on her head, an injury that likely indicates she was in a violent fight or was pushed or tossed into the water while unconscious. The case was revisited a few years back, but no significant developments emerged. Justice remains elusive, a pattern you'll find recurring as we dive deeper into this video. Take a look at this.
The position is this job still open?
Oh, you are a baker.
Yes, sir, and I sure need dough.
I got it.
Number 18. The Innocence of Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle. Glamour, iconic films, and the rise of legendary stars filled the scene. The early 1920s in Hollywood was the essence of old Hollywood, but one event would change the face of the silent film era and tarnish the career of one of its biggest stars. Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle, known for his comedic roles and cheerful demeanor, was adored by many. Yet he fell headfirst into a scandal so shocking that it sent shockwaves throughout the industry. But what exactly happened? Was Arbuckle a victim of a conspiracy, or was something darker unfolding? To uncover the truth, we need to look back to the beginning. As one of the first stars to emerge from the acting industry, Fatty Arbuckle struck gold in silent movies. He kick-started the inept policeman trope and pioneered the pie-in-the-face gag that has long been a comedic staple. At the peak of his career, Arbuckle was signed to a massive $3 million contract for 18 films under Paramount Pictures, but it marked the beginning of the end. His friend Fred Fishback threw a lavish 3-day party at the St. Francis Hotel in San Francisco to celebrate the grand paycheck. But the festivities ended in tragedy when Arbuckle was arrested and charged with the death of 25-year-old actress Virginia Rappe. She was found drunk and gravely ill in Arbuckle's room and later died from peritonitis due to a ruptured bladder. Her death sparked a series of unexpected events, and Arbuckle was placed in a jail cell, held without bail, less than a week after the party of the year. But here is where things get really spooky. First off, the entire situation was a tragic case of sensationalism. Tabloids poisoned the minds of everyone with lies and deceit just to stir up outrage and vilify the actor. Despite evidence suggesting Rappe may have had a pre-existing medical condition that caused her bladder to rupture, the media continued to portray Arbuckle as a monster and shaped public opinion before the legal process could even begin. The poor actor was charged with molestation and manslaughter, and it took 3 trials to clear his name, the last of which included a public statement by the judge expressing that Arbuckle had suffered injustice. Sadly, the damage was irreversible. Arbuckle's career was gone with the wind. Hollywood, under pressure from the Motion Picture Producers and Distributors of America, banned him from working in film, and copies of his movies were destroyed to ensure they would never be seen again. Arbuckle died of a heart attack at the age of 46, marking a tragic end to one of the greatest victims of mob rule and injustice. Hollywood attempted to fix this blind side by introducing morality clauses in actors' contracts, but they led to numerous issues as the strict control over actors' careers and personal lives created opportunities for exploitation. This was one of them. Number 17. Hollywood's lavender marriages. Have you ever heard rumors of Hollywood stars hiding their sexualities due to fear of being victimized or excommunicated? Well, it's true, and this didn't just begin in the modern era. Golden Age stars had to shape their public image to please the studios that made them famous. For queer actors, this often meant staying in the closet or entering a lavender marriage, a union with the opposite sex for the sole purpose of appearing heterosexual. These sham marriages date back to the early 1900s and were part of the industry's best-kept secrets. One of the first rumored lavender marriages was the 1919 union between silent film star Rudolph Valentino and actress Jean Acker, who was allegedly a lesbian. She was said to have locked Valentino out of their hotel room on their wedding night, though the union quickly ended in divorce. Surprise, surprise. What's more, Valentino also married costume designer Natasha Rambova in 1923, during a period when his career was gaining momentum with roles like the less traditionally masculine part in the 1924 film Monsieur Beaucaire. Their marriage ended in 1925, sparking rumors that Valentino likely used his relationships with sex symbols to maintain a clean public image. But what about the legendary Rock Hudson? He took part in a lavender marriage with Phyllis Gates to silence the rumors that Confidential magazine was planning to expose his homosexuality. That being said, not all queer actors lived under the rocks. Some of them were out in the open despite the risks involved. One of the first was William Haynes, a popular actor in the 1920s and 1930s who refused to hide his relationship with Jimmy Shields. However, Haynes was contracted with MGM, giving the studio the authority to issue a stern ultimatum: marry a woman or leave the business. Curious about what he did next? Well, your guess is as good as mine. Haynes refused to conform to the studio's expectations and left the industry immediately. He established a thriving interior design business with his partner and is now fondly remembered as one of Hollywood's first openly gay stars. Haynes' bravery is often celebrated in positive discussions. But here's a nasty rumor that Hollywood would rather you forget, more so because it was true.
You grew up thinking you didn't have value?
I grew up filled with self-loathing because I was Puerto Rican. When you're little and you're told you're not worth.
Number 16. Old Hollywood's racial history. It hurts to say this, but Hollywood's history is deeply entangled with systemic racism. White male filmmakers in the early days catered to a white audience, and the consequences were far-reaching. Non-white actors were either excluded or relegated to stereotypical, demeaning roles that reinforced a narrow, biased view of race, most especially black characters who were so often portrayed in degrading roles such as clowns or servants. One of the most notorious examples of racial distortion is D.W. Griffith's The Birth of a Nation, a film that glamorized the Ku Klux Klan while depicting African Americans as savage and threatening. It fueled racial violence, led to a resurgence in Klan activity, and drastically increased the brutality against Black Americans. But no, the racism didn't stop with the Black community. Native Americans were treated with equal disdain, and their cultures were largely misrepresented or erased. Silent films reduced them to crude stereotypes, and the sound of the 1930s ushered in nonsensical, fabricated languages that further damaged their real cultures. As if this weren't enough, Hollywood's treatment of Asian actors was equally problematic. Asians were often cast as villains or seductresses, and don't even get me started on the yellow face trope. Not even those who broke through Hollywood's racial barriers survived constant inequality and segregation. Where do we even start? Ah, yes, Hattie McDaniel. She was the first African American to win an Oscar, but was forced to sit apart from the rest of the cast at the Academy Awards. And how about the beautiful Dorothy Dandridge? She earned an Academy Award nomination for her dazzling performance in the 1954 musical Carmen Jones, but struggled to secure significant roles in Hollywood until her tragic death at the age of 42. The scars of Hollywood's racist past may be healing, but it's an explosive example of just how dirty the world's greatest entertainment industry truly is. Appalled by Tinseltown's explosive secrets thus far? Just wait until you hear about the next one.
He was the CEO, and then the head of the studio was another man. And both of them were after me and dangling the cherry, which was the role of...
Number 15. Hollywood's casting couch. Film critic and historian Carrie Rickey once said that the dangers for women in Hollywood are ingrained, like hidden landmines, from an actress's first role to her final performance. She couldn't have been more right. From the early days of Hollywood, women were stage managed and manipulated by older men in powerful positions. Moguls like Harry Conn coerced starlets like Marilyn Monroe to audition in bed before casting them. Little wonder she compared Hollywood to an overcrowded brothel. Shirley Temple once shared that a producer at MGM exposed himself to her while she was working, and Louis B. Mayer insisted that his protege Judy Garland sit on his lap. Columbia was just as terrifying. Harry Cohn chased Ginger Rogers around a desk making passes. And Buddy Adler of 20th Century Fox harassed 19-year-old Rita Moreno and refused to give Joan Collins the lead role in Cleopatra because she refused to play nice. Not even legendary Hollywood producer Darryl F. Zanuck was a saint. Stories circulated about his fast-paced romantic entanglements with actresses, claiming he went through them as quickly as his movie's opening credits. Every day at 4 p.m. was a routine for the mogul. The Fox Century City studio would pause, and a young woman would be quietly escorted through a hidden passage to his green-paneled office. The worst part is, he wasn't even serious about any of the women. They were merely pleasurable breaks in the day. It makes me remember the dreadful case of Harvey Weinstein, where dozens of women came forward with allegations so disturbing that his wife and political allies left him. The organization behind the Oscars voted to expel him, and France's president announced plans to revoke his Legion of Honor award. But if you think the fight against predatory behavior and workplace harassment in Hollywood is over, just wait till you hear the sadistic rumors surrounding the Tasmanian Devil.
Do you remember my father used to be professor of biology at Queen's? He always used to say, man is a savage animal who periodically, to relieve his nervous tension, tries to destroy himself.
Number 14. Errol Flynn was a predator. Errol Flynn became Hollywood's leading swashbuckling hero after his starring role in the 1935 film Captain Blood, but he made headlines for all the wrong reasons just 7 years later. Statutory molestation of 2 girls. But did he really do it? Errol Flynn will always be remembered as one of the finest of the Golden Age, but he had a dark side. He was expelled from school at 17 and ran the infamous Razor Gang of young toughs in Sydney. Sure, he took advantage of his family's seafaring history to make something of himself, but he glorified the brutality of his inner demons. He let it shape his character to the point where he saw no wrong in being the phallic symbol notoriously associated with debauchery. It's safe to say his father was right. Flynn bragged about his sexual endeavors, including the powerful women he bedded, until 1943 when his predatory behavior finally caught up with him. Though Flynn acknowledged a consensual encounter with Peggy Satterley, he denied knowing Betty Hansen intimately. In fact, he joked about the absurdity of asking someone for proof of identity like a birth certificate or a letter from their mother. The trial captured the media's attention, turning Flynn into a national laughingstock, but he had in no way learned his lesson. There were whispers in Hollywood about Flynn's strange behavior, and one of them involved a haunting story in which he invited a fellow actor to check out the best-looking girls in LA. They supposedly drove down Sunset Boulevard and parked across from Hollywood High as school was letting out. Flynn allegedly referred to the girls as jailbait and joked about them being a waste. Imagine that. Flynn, a swashbuckling hero to millions of Americans, was merely a stubborn, sadistic man at heart. Number 13. Malevolent contracts. Lavish opulence, expensive jewelry, and luxurious mansions. Golden Age actors enjoyed a never-before-seen status in the industry. Their glamorous lives seemed untouchable, but behind the scenes, things weren't as perfect as they appeared. In the dawn of the 1920s, Hollywood film studios sent talent scouts to discover new actors to turn into stars. These scouts signed promising performers to long-term contracts that primarily protected the financial interest of the studios far more than the performers. Why? Because it limited actors to working with one studio for either a series of films or several years at a stretch. The worst part? Actors were bound to their contracts until the studio decided they were no longer profitable. Studios had full control over how often stars worked, and exhaustion was out of the question. There was no way out, and they had to comply entirely just to receive their pay. At first glance, it seemed like these celebrities were well paid for their work, with some Hollywood stars making up to $5,000 a week, a huge sum in the 1920s. However, their earnings didn't always grow with their fame. Studio contracts locked in their pay rates, leaving them stuck at the same salary no matter how successful they became. Take Judy Garland, for example. She was the face of The Wizard of Oz and one of MGM's biggest stars, but she was making a fraction of what she should have. She maintained her $500 a week pay for so many years while studio executives raked in millions, controlling every aspect of her career from her salary to her personal life. And it wasn't just actors who faced this issue. The rules also applied to directors, writers, producers, cinematographers, art directors, and technicians. Everyone behind the scenes was held to very limiting studio-friendly deals. If they didn't sign, they didn't work. This system, known as studio self-sufficiency, helped streamline production but severely limited creative freedom. Stars had no real way to challenge the crisis, and it's one of the major reasons why so many Golden Age icons either died in poverty or were tossed aside in obscurity. Speaking of the latter, here's a Hollywood icon we're glad to see buried under his wicked acts.
Accusations against him as well. And Spencer, I mean, here he is. After all of these women have come forward, and again, he is denying.
Number 12. Bill Cosby's serial assaults. Has Hollywood witnessed a bigger fall from grace than Bill Cosby's? Loved and adored as America's dad, Mr. Cosby not only left a lasting impact on the entertainment industry, but also broke racial barriers. He made history in 1965 as the first black actor to star in a drama series with his role in I Spy. He portrayed Alexander Scott, an undercover agent disguised as a tennis instructor, alongside Robert Culp as his partner, Kelly Robinson. Why was it so monumental? It premiered at a time when race relations were still fiercely debated. Some stations in the southern states even banned it. Yet Cosby went on to earn 3 consecutive Best Actor Emmys for his role, a record that's still unbroken. Alas, his reputation shattered to a million pieces when he was sentenced to 3 to 10 years in jail after being convicted of sexual misconduct. What did he do? Well, it would be easier to list what he didn't do. The allegations against Cosby first emerged in 2005 when Andrea Constand, a former university staff member, claimed he had drugged and assaulted her at his home the previous year. Though prosecutors chose not to pursue criminal charges, citing insufficient evidence, Constand filed a civil lawsuit against Cosby. 13 women, 12 of whom remained anonymous, came forward with similar accounts as witnesses. Unfortunately, the case was settled out of court for an undisclosed amount, allowing Cosby to avoid any legal consequences at the time. Efforts were made to nail Cosby in the following years, but they never gained traction until Cosby's attempt at a TV comeback brought him back into the public eye. Over 50 women eventually accused him of exploitation, harassment, and gross misconduct. Cosby's defense team denied the charges once again, questioning why the women had not filed legal complaints at the time of the alleged assaults. Not long after, previously unseen court documents from 2005 surfaced, revealing that Cosby had admitted to acquiring Quaaludes to give to young women he planned to sleep with. It is a powerful sedative that quickly induced immobility, leaving the victims unable to resist. The accusations shattered Cosby's hopes of a return to show business. TV Land removed reruns of The Cosby Show, and some of his stand-up performances were canceled, while protesters gathered at the ones that still took place. His statue was also taken down from the MGM Hollywood Studios Park in Florida, and numerous colleagues revoked the honorary degrees they had awarded him. Cosby resigned from Temple University's Board of Trustees, and all portraits of him were removed from the halls, a disgraceful end to one of Hollywood's nastiest predators. Number 11. Errol Flynn had Nazi affiliations. Depravity, alcoholism, hedonism, Errol Flynn was already Hollywood's most notorious bad boy, but he went a step further by allegedly being a Nazi spy. While the theory has been widely discredited, it refuses to die, largely because of Flynn's questionable associations and some damning letters he wrote in his youth. Where do we start from? Yes, Flynn's friendship with Dr. Hermann Urban, a Nazi intelligence agent before World War II. The two traveled together and maintained a close bond, raising eyebrows about Flynn's possible sympathies. But like that wasn't already damning enough, private letters written by Errol Flynn contained anti-Semitic remarks, including a shocking statement in which he wished the U.S. had its own version of Hitler to teach the Jews a thing or two. Yeah, it gets even worse. Mr. Flynn also allegedly insulted studio mogul Jack Warner on set by saying, "We don't allow any Jews on the set." Comments as such not only fuel the theory that he harbored fascist sympathies, but also that he might have been a Nazi supporter even if he wasn't a spy. Adding fuel to the fire was Charles Higgin's biography by Errol Flynn. Higgin claimed Flynn had spied for the Nazis both before and during the war, even helping Japan by filming Dive Bomber at a U.S. naval base to give enemy forces intelligence on American warships. But hey, the author admitted that he had little to no solid proof, so we should probably be taking it with a pinch of salt. Flynn's close friend, actor David Niven, dismissed Higgin's claims as baseless, and his daughters even sued for libel. Though the case was dismissed, since the law doesn't allow libel claims on behalf of the deceased. Flynn's only defense was an open condemnation of the Nazis. He volunteered to work undercover for U.S. intelligence when America entered the war, and he severed ties with his Nazi friend, calling him a screwball, though the U.S. government kept him under surveillance. The Federal Bureau of Investigation launched formal interrogations, but dropped the case, citing a lack of substantial evidence. But what do you think? Could Errol Flynn truly have been a fascist sympathizer after all? Share your thoughts in the comments as we unpack Hollywood's next explosive secret. Number 10. Hollywood's mob ties. Inflated budgets, cleanups, money laundering schemes. Hollywood has long been a magnet for organized crime due to its wealth and influence. Flexible power structures and questionable methods breed shady vices, and the LA Mafia, which originated from Italian-American street gangs like the Black Hands and the Matranga family, have had deep ties into the industry. Enter Hollywood hotshot, Academy Award-winning actor, and the leading figure of the Rat Pack, Frank Sinatra. He had a massive following, adored by both men and women, but it wasn't just his fans and critics who had an interest in him. The FBI did too. The Bureau tracked Frank Sinatra for 40 years, compiling a massive dossier that chronicled not only his every move, but also his speech and association. Wondering what they discovered? You might want to brace yourself. Sinatra always denied having any connections to the mob, but his files revealed a different story after his death. He was linked to infamous figures like Chicago mob boss Sam Giancana, received gifts from mafia members such as Joseph and Charles Fischetti, and had ties to mafia events, including attending a wedding for the daughter of Philadelphia mobster Angelo Bruno. Although Sinatra was never charged with any crimes, he wasn't the only one linked to mob ties. Lana Turner's boyfriend, Johnny Stompanato, was a tough mobster who once barged onto the set of Another Time, Another Place, with a gun aimed at Sean Connery. The reason? Jealousy. Rumors had spread that Connery and Turner were having an affair, and Johnny wanted to put a stop to it. However, he bit off more than he could handle. Connery swiftly disarmed him, knocked him out with a single punch, and then gave him a brutal beating. The fight only ended when crew members pulled Connery away, leaving Stompanato writhing in pain. He never returned to the set. Number 9. Alfred Hitchcock's poor treatment of women. Louis B. Mayer of MGM may go down as one of the most diabolical figures in Hollywood history, but Alfred Hitchcock was just as sinister. The master of suspense hid a disturbing side beneath his iconic career, particularly his sadistic treatment of women. He let power corrupt him and coerced many leading women to do whatever he wanted. Remember Tippi Hedren? The actress worked on exceptional projects with Hitchcock, most notably The Birds and Marnie, but the reality behind the scenes was anything but glamorous. Hedren revealed how Hitchcock's obsessive and controlling nature took a toll on her during filming. He made unwelcome sexual advances and fostered a toxic, hostile environment. One of the most infamous incidents occurred on the set of The Birds when Hitchcock insisted on using live birds for a key scene, despite earlier assurances that mechanical birds would be used. This intentional switch led to a grueling, terrifying experience for Hedren, where live birds were hurled at her. The ordeal left her temporarily hospitalized after one bird pecked her near the eye. Like that wasn't bad enough, Hitchcock was notably indifferent to Hedren's suffering. He refused to allow the star to rest after the incident, further exacerbating her distress. Unsurprisingly, the toxicity extended beyond filming. He retaliated against Hedren's unrequited love by preventing her from taking roles with other studios, using his control over her contract to limit her opportunities after Marnie. He was a sadistic streak who thrived on control and intimidation. Sadly, the depravity of old Hollywood extended to animal actors, who, just like their human counterparts, were stripped of safety while on set. Number 8. Poor treatment of animals. We've seen it at circuses and zoos, at parks and countless racetracks. Animals used in entertainment often endure significant suffering, and the film and television industries are no different. They are separated from their mothers at a young age and treated as mere props, trained to perform unnatural tricks on demand, until they become too old, unwell, or unprofitable. Recent studies suggest animals used in film and television often endure food deprivation and abuse to keep them on their toes. But the legacy of mistreatment tragically goes back much further. Films like the 1925 Ben-Hur and classic Western films were notorious for their brutal horse falls, while the horror staple Friday the 13th even went as far as killing a snake on camera. What could possibly be worse than that? With little regulation or oversight, training methods and living conditions was a recurring issue during the Golden Age. But thankfully, we're changing the narrative. Organizations like PETA have been very helpful in encouraging filmmakers to use CGI, animatronics, or even their own pets, as Bradley Cooper did in A Star is Born, instead of relying on commercial animal suppliers. But speaking of problems fixed by contemporary movements, here's one of the darkest episodes of the Golden Age left unsolved.
Thus proving my point that Hamming is not overacting. It is false acting, it's fakery. And there's not a fake minute.
Number 7. The Black Dahlia Murder. Remember when the gruesome image of Elizabeth Short's lifeless body sent shockwaves across the nation in 1947? Well, there's a pretty big reason why it's one of the most infamous murders in American history. It's been unsolved to this day, and there have been many conspiracy theories that still haunt us. Among the many suspects linked to the Black Dahlia case, one of the most unexpected and well-known is legendary director and actor Orson Welles. Yes, that Orson Welles, the creative genius behind Citizen Kane. In her 1999 book Childhood Shadows, The Hidden Story of the Black Dahlia Murder, Mary Pacios brought Welles into the spotlight with startling claims. She argued that Welles may have suffered from a diphasic personality disorder, a condition some link to the violent tendencies in serial killers. Her reason? A creepy magic act Welles performed in the 1940s where Welles pretended to saw women in half, and a series of mutilated mannequins he designed for the 1947 film The Lady from Shanghai. Though the mutilated mannequins were not used in the film, they bore eerie similarities to Elizabeth Short's injuries and were designed just 3 months before her murder. In the end, though, the Black Dahlia suspects on this list are simply that, suspects. To this day, no one has been formally charged with Elizabeth Short's murder, and that's what makes it one of the most fascinating and unsettling unsolved homicides of the 20th century. But what do you think? Was Pacios onto something? Or is Welles' connection just another Hollywood myth spun over the years? While pondering on your answer, make sure to subscribe and turn on post notifications so you never miss an update. There's plenty more where this came from, and you won't want to miss the next big reveal, starting with this. Number 6. Joan Crawford's explicit video. Shade Joan Crawford all you want, but she's got one of the most touching coming-of-age stories. Her career was one of calculated reinvention. She clawed her way from poverty to Hollywood royalty, carefully managing her image along the way. But among the many rumors that followed her, the most scandalous was the alleged existence of an early stag film, a claim that refused to fade even as she became one of the biggest stars of the studio era. The supposed film, often referred to by titles like Velvet Lips or The Casting Couch, was rumored to have been made before Crawford arrived in Hollywood, at a time when she was still Lucille Lesueur, a young woman struggling to make ends meet. Wondering why it was kept out of the public? Well, that's because Crawford's home studio, MGM, quickly intervened and paid $100,000 to ensure it was hushed and kept out of public circulation. No physical copy has ever surfaced, but whispers of its existence were persistent. Some biographers and historians suggest that MGM, desperate to protect its investment in Crawford, may have stepped in, using both money and mob connections to make the problem disappear. The studio allegedly enlisted notorious gangster Johnny Roselli to intimidate blackmailers into handing over the film's negatives. What do we make of it? No one knows where the copies of Crawford's explicit videos lie, but the implication is clear. If such a film existed, powerful figures ensured it was buried. Yet conflicting accounts muddy the waters. Crawford's first husband, Douglas Fairbanks Jr., claimed she tearfully admitted to making such a film in a moment of financial desperation, though he never saw it himself. On the other hand, Crawford maintained in her memoir that blackmailers had targeted her, but that the alleged film they produced wasn't of her at all. Her brother Hal, whose relationship with her was notoriously strained, was accused of trying to sell the story multiple times, though a couple of sources suggest that Hal may have fabricated the entire story out of spite or simply as a means to extort his famous sister. Be that as it may, the truth about Joan Crawford's alleged stag film remains elusive. Hollywood's golden age was built on illusion, and studios were known to go to extraordinary lengths to protect their stars. Whether this was the case of buried evidence or just another example of salacious gossip spun into legend, we may never know. But you'd be hard-pressed to say that the controversy doesn't add to Crawford's enduring mystique, one that, even decades after her death, continues to be salacious. Number 5. Charlie Chaplin was not what he seemed. Ladies and gentlemen, there's a reason why history fondly remembers Charlie Chaplin as one of the greatest figures in the history of the silent era, if not all of entertainment. He single-handedly rejuvenated the niche, and his poignant style has been replicated generation after generation. However, for all his brilliance on the silver screen, Chaplin's personal life was so often painted with scandal and controversy. Take his tumultuous second marriage to Lita Grey, for instance. From start to finish, the union was doomed to fail. The silent actor married Grey when she was only a teenager, and rumors also circulated that she was pregnant, though this was later proven false. And the divorce court proceedings were nothing short of a spectacle. Grey described Chaplin as a controlling, abusive husband and an absentee father with a disturbing proclivity for much younger women. Can you believe that? A man seemingly perfect has such a contrasting double life. As the details of their toxic marriage spilled into the media, Chaplin's reputation as a beloved entertainer took a severe hit. Public sympathy largely turned against him despite his cinematic achievements. Coming next is something equally surprising, probably even more. Number 4. Spade Cooley's growing paranoia. At the peak of his career, Spade Cooley was more than just a country music star. He was a one-man army. Hit records came easily, and he was a familiar face in movies and on television. But as they say, the brightest lights often cast the darkest shadows. Behind the scenes, Cooley struggled to cope with the pressures of fame. His paranoia grew, and his temper flared at the slightest provocation. This toxic combination reached a boiling point when he became convinced that his second wife, Ella May, was unfaithful. What happened next would forever overshadow his career and leave a dark stain on his legacy. Overcome by rage, he assaulted his wife with such ferocity and for such a prolonged time that she succumbed to her injuries. Can you imagine the sheer brutality? Ella May's tragic death shocked the nation, and Cooley's trial became a media sensation, drawing massive crowds to the courtroom. In August 1961, he was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. You might want to sit tight for this next one. It's a story so shocking, so unbelievable, that it might just leave you questioning everything you thought you knew. Trust me, you're not ready for what's coming next. Number 3. Marilyn Monroe's secret relationship with President John F. Kennedy. Can we all admit that Marilyn Monroe's alleged affair with John F. Kennedy is one of the most fascinating relationships in Hollywood and political history? Miss Monroe was the industry's quintessential masterpiece, and JFK, well, he was the president. Both parties failed to publicly acknowledge the rumors, but let's be real. There's no fire without smoke, especially when a diva like Monroe performs a sultry rendition of Happy Birthday for sitting president. But the whispers don't end there. Monroe's supposed involvement with both JFK and his brother Robert F. Kennedy runs so deep that many believe they were somehow responsible for her death. Don't believe it? Wait until we fill you in. The story goes that Monroe and JFK were introduced by actor Peter Lawford in the mid-1950s, and their alleged affair peaked in the following decade. However, as the affair became a potential political liability, JFK reportedly cut ties with Monroe and introduced her to his brother Robert, much to Monroe's dismay. She was said to be devastated by the rejection, threatening to go public with what she knew about the Kennedys, a revelation that could have damaged the administration beyond repair. Did this play a role in her tragic death? Yeah, that's difficult to say for sure. Monroe was found dead in her Los Angeles home on August 5, 1962, from a barbiturate overdose. Her death was ruled a probable self-unalivement. However, many believe she was silenced because of what she knew, especially after wiretaps allegedly captured an argument between Monroe and Robert Kennedy on the night of her death. Monroe's biographer, Anthony Summers, uncovered testimony suggesting that Robert Kennedy had visited Monroe's home shortly before her death, fueling speculation that her overdose may not have been an accident. And don't even get us started on the endless theories of cover-ups. Critical evidence, including Monroe's phone records, mysteriously disappeared, and those closest to her kept silent. To make things even more suspicious, Robert Kennedy was conveniently out of town when the news broke. But what do you think? Could Monroe's fall have been orchestrated by the Kennedys? Her second husband, Joe DiMaggio, certainly thought so. He famously remarked, "They did in my poor Marilyn." The truth remains elusive, even decades after her death. But one thing is certain. Her connection to the most powerful family in America came at a steep price. Number 2. The real reason Veronica Lake died poor. As one of the biggest stars of the 1940s, Lake's life may have seemed like a dream come true. She went from being an unknown extra to an overnight sensation in Hollywood. But her success came at a cost. Her mother forced her into the spotlight after she was placed in a beauty pageant, and just like that, Lake gave up her own dreams and devoted herself to intense training to perfect her craft. Luckily, it paid off. She landed a part in I Wanted Wings, despite having a few minor roles to her name. It was here that moviegoers first saw her signature look, her golden hair cascading over one eye in the now famous peekaboo style. Lake would later confess it was to hide her nerves. But hey, it was all worth it. Her adopted dream of fame and critical acclaim was accomplished. She began to star in femme fatale roles in film noir along with some of the biggest names in the industry, until her world came crashing down. Remember the 1941 incident while filming Sullivan's Travels? She was heavily pregnant at the time and tried to hide it from the director, Preston Sturges, who was so furious when he discovered the truth that he had to be physically restrained. In 1943, Lake accidentally tripped over a cable on set, leading to the premature birth of her second child, who sadly passed away shortly after. Just weeks later, she filed for divorce from her husband. With her life fast becoming a train wreck, Lake began to get scrutinized by the press and the public. But the truth of the matter was that behind the scenes, Veronica Lake was losing herself. She became heavily alcoholic to cope with the personal tragedy of losing her child. And everything turned worse when the press and negative reviews began to derail her career. From 1948 through 1951, Veronica's Paramount contract got shelved. Her second husband filed for bankruptcy, and soon after, the IRS seized their home due to unpaid taxes. This made her move to theater, where she made mediocre features. After 3 divorces, she was drifting between cheap hotels in New York City and was arrested multiple times for public drunkenness and disorderly conduct. Sadly, she was never able to overcome her alcoholism and died in 1973 of acute hepatitis and acute kidney injury. She was only 50. Number 1. Johnny Stompanato's death. Decades have passed since Johnny Stompanato's murder rocked Hollywood, yet it remains one of the industry's most shocking scandals, not just for its brutality, but for the swirling rumors that still cloud the truth of what really happened that night. The case was a justifiable homicide on paper. Cheryl Crane bore witness to her mother, Lana Turner, trapped in a toxic and violent relationship with Johnny Stompanato. But things took a terrifying turn on April 4th, 1958, when Johnny threatened Lana and her mother, Mildred. With no time to spare, a heroic Cheryl grabbed an 8-inch knife to fight the abuser, only for him to walk into the blade by accident. The result? A single, fatal stab wound that sent shockwaves through Hollywood. Right off the bat, Stompanato's death fits the classic narrative of an abusive man meeting his fate at the hands of a protective loved one. The courtroom testimony painted Crane as a terrified daughter acting on impulse to protect her mother from a violent gangster. But as the dust settled, skeptics began asking questions like why Jerry Geisler rushed to control the narrative. The celebrity lawyer was Hollywood's escape guy, and he helped Errol Flynn beat the statutory misconduct charges. Then came the next problem. Some of Stompanato's friends believed that Turner caught him in bed with Cheryl, flew into a rage, and killed him herself. If that were true, then the emotional courtroom testimony, the tears, the detailed accounts of abuse, was nothing more than a carefully planned deception. Lana knew her daughter would escape severe punishment, being a minor, so it's possible that they lied to everyone. Almost 70 years have passed since Johnny died, but we're still no closer to the truth. If you found this video intriguing, press the like button and share your thoughts in the comments below. Craving more hidden Hollywood secrets? You're just one click away. Grab a snack and dive into the next video on your screen.